When Allie Remold boarded Flight 2223 in Houston, it felt like any other trip. She was tired, preoccupied, and eager to get to her destination. Her mother had recently had a heart attack, which no one had seen coming, as she had been very healthy up until then. Allie couldn't quite shake the worry that had settled over her in the days since. Airports, with their endless activity, were a familiar backdrop to her life, but today, even the rhythm of travel couldn't distract her. As she made her way down the aisle and settled into her seat, the usual hum of the cabin surrounded her. People stowed their luggage, flight attendants directed passengers, and announcements played in the background. Allie barely registered any of it. She pulled out her phone to send a quick text, checked the time, and leaned back, letting out a quiet sigh. The plane was nearly ready to take off, but little did she know something was about to happen that would leave her stunned. Unbeknownst to her, someone else was moving quickly through the terminal. On the opposite side of the airport, United Airlines captain David Whitson had just wrapped up his own flight. He wasn't scheduled to board Allie's plane. He wasn't even working that route. But when he saw her name appear in the system, everything else faded into the background. David had flown into Houston that morning, completely unaware that Allie would be there. The notification caught him off guard, but filled him with a determination that propelled him into action. And suddenly he knew he couldn't ignore the feeling. He simply had to take action. Now! He immediately reached out to the captain of Flight 2223, quickly explaining his request. Then, with permission from the crew and gate agents, he left his post and began weaving through the busy airport, hoping to make it in time. Back on the plane, Allie watched as passengers continued filing in. She glanced out the window, her thoughts wandering. The past few years had been a whirlwind. Between earning her PhD, starting her career in public health research, and juggling life's unexpected challenges, she rarely paused to reflect. Today was no different. Her focus was on the present, her family, her work, and the hours of travel ahead. The cabin was nearly full now, and the crew prepared to close the doors. Allie reached for her bag to grab her headphones, but before she could put them on, the PA system crackled to life. At first, she thought it was a routine announcement, a welcome message or reminders about safety. Instead, she heard a name, her name. The voice on the intercom paused briefly, then continued. Allie froze, trying to process what was happening. Her heart raced and she glanced around, confused. It took a moment for the words to fully register. Her heart raced, and she glanced around the cabin. She hadn't told anyone about her travel plans, and certainly not her history with a United Airlines pilot. Slowly the words began to register, and her eyes darted to the front of the plane, and then she saw him. There, standing at the front of the aisle, was David Whitson. It had been years since she'd last seen him, but there was no mistaking who he was. But one thing was certain. Their connection was far from ordinary. He walked toward her, his movements deliberate yet filled with emotion. Allie's mind reeled as she pieced everything together, the surprise quickly replaced by a flood of memories. Years earlier, their lives had intersected in a way neither could have predicted. At the time, Allie was just 22 years old and a college student, studying behavioral sciences and dipping her toes into public health advocacy. She'd joined a bone marrow registry on a whim during a campus event, swabbing her cheek with little expectation that she'd ever be called, like most people do. But little did she know how wrong she was. You see, on one ordinary day, Allie was home when she got a call from a number she did not recognize. And what she was told at the other end of the line left her completely stunned. It was information she never expected to hear. Somewhere, someone was in desperate need of a bone marrow transplant. Allie was a match, a perfect match. Without hesitation, she said yes. She didn't know the recipient's name or details, only that her donation could save a life. That life turned out to be David's. David, a husband, father, and commercial airline pilot, had been diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia, an aggressive blood cancer that had upended his life. Chemotherapy hadn't worked, and his chances of survival were slipping away. In fact, it was so slim, the doctors had given him a 5% chance of survival. The end for David was looming, and he was terrified. His own family members weren't suitable donors, leaving him reliant on the registry and the hope that a stranger would say yes. Allie's donation gave him that hope. She was a complete stranger who just so happened to have blood closer to his than his own brother. Her stem cells replaced his failing immune system, giving his body a chance to heal. For David, it wasn't just about a second chance. It was a transformation. The stem transplant had worked so well. In the years that followed, he returned to the life he loved, flying planes, and spending such wonderful times with his wife and kids. These were moments at one point he never even thought he'd get a chance to see. Allie had been the silent hero in the background and was a special stranger he wanted to meet and thank in person. When they finally met years later, the bond was immediate. Grateful beyond words, David had even extended his airline travel benefits to Allie, allowing her to fly as part of his family. Over the years, their lives occasionally intersected through messages. Allie's gift of life she had given to David also meant the world to her. The pair would see each other when possible during their annual check-ins, but they hadn't seen each other in person for quite some time. And yet here he was, standing in front of her. It was a meeting the two never expected to happen so randomly, but it was one they both appreciated. David stopped at her row, his expression a mix of joy and gratitude. He explained to the passengers what had brought him there, sharing the story of the stranger who had saved his life. As he spoke, the cabin filled with the sound of applause, a spontaneous reaction to a story that was anything but ordinary. For Allie, the moment was overwhelming. She hadn't expected any of this, but as she listened to David's words and saw the emotion on his face, she felt a deep sense of connection and gratitude. Not just for the chance to help him all those years ago, but for the reminder of what it meant to be human. It felt so good to not only just help someone in need, but to actually save a person's life felt, well, completely and utterly incredible. The rest of the flight was quieter. Allie stared out the window, the events replaying in her mind. Life had a way of surprising her, of weaving connections in ways she could never predict. The past week had been heavy. Although her mom was recovering from her heart attack, Allie had been very low and worried most of the time. But this reunion brought a sense of lightness, a small but powerful reminder that even in the midst of uncertainty, there were moments of clarity and meaning. For David, it was another chance to thank the woman who had given him his life back. For a man who knew he had been so close to death, he was grateful beyond words to be alive and kicking. For Allie, it was a moment to reflect on how even the smallest choices can make the biggest impact, touching lives in ways we might never fully understand. As the plane ascended into the sky, their story touched those who witnessed their reunion. As all the passengers looked on teary-eyed after learning why the pilot had given a passenger such a warm hug, it was clear to see David and Allie were no longer just strangers. They had now become lifelong friends. If you want more positivity in your life and enjoy inspirational stories like this, then like this video and subscribe for more true stories.
Just wanted to say hello and give her a big hug. It's not every day you can hug the person that saved your life.